Imagine you're driving down the highway.
Okay.
You're just cruising along, looking at the scenery, listening to music, and suddenly you find yourself completely boxed in by massive commercial trucks.
Oh, yeah. We have all been there.
Right. You've got this 80,000-pound machine roaring on your left, another one on your right, and maybe like one tailgating you in the rearview mirror.
It definitely gets your attention.
It really does. It sharpens your focus immediately. You find yourself gripping the steering wheel, just hoping the person driving that behemoth isn't, falling asleep.
Right, or hoping their air brakes aren't about to fail on a steep downhill slope.
Exactly. But beyond that momentary anxiety, that little spike of adrenaline, have you ever actually wondered who makes sure those specific trucks are safe?
Because they don't just stay safe by accident.
Right. Who builds the guardrails to ensure the whole North American freight system doesn't just, collapse into total chaos?
It's a massive question.
Mm.
And honestly, that level of highway safety doesn't just manifest out of thin air. There is this incredibly complex, mostly invisible ecosystem of oversight.
Working behind the scenes.
Exactly, working 24/7 to keep those commercial vehicles from becoming massive public hazards.
So today, we are doing a deep dive into our source material. It's a breakdown called The Pillars of North American Trucking Regulation.
And there is a lot to unpack there.
There really is. Our mission here is to decode this massive alphabet soup of regulations governing the highway. We're specifically looking at the DOT, the Fmcsa, and the Cvsa.
Which are essentially the three distinct pillars forming the backbone of trucking safety across the U.S. and Canada.
And whether you're an industry professional who moves freight every day or just someone who relies on goods being delivered to your local grocery store, which is literally everyone you really need to care about this.
Oh, 100%. Understanding this regulatory ecosystem is basically a shortcut to understanding how our entire physical economy actually functions.
And how it stays safe.
Right. Because the stakes here, they go far beyond dry administrative paperwork. The source material outlines this really high-tension balancing act.
What kind of balancing act?
Well, on one end of the spectrum, you have the absolute public necessity of keeping the roads safe, right? Driving those fatality numbers down.
Which everyone wants.
Of course. But on the other end, you have the very real risk of just crushing independent operators and small businesses under the weight of overwhelming, really expensive red tape.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And every single rule we're going to talk about today exists right at the center of that tension.
Okay, so let's start by establishing the hierarchy right from the top down. Because before we can figure out how the rules are actually enforced out there on the asphalt, we need to understand who is drafting them.
Right, the mechanics of the rulemaking.
Exactly. And the sources begin with the biggest umbrella of them all, which is the DOT, or the Department of Transportation.
The DOT is basically the federal parent organization here. When you look at their mandate, they don't just regulate trucks. I mean, they are a cabinet-level department overseeing the entire national transportation grid.
So we're talking about everything.
Everything. Funding interstate highway construction, managing aviation policies, regulating railroads, overseeing pipelines, and, yes, commercial trucking.
They are setting the macro-level policy for the whole country.
Exactly.
So if the DOT is like the city planner laying out the grid, dictating where the roads go and how the system functions at a macro level, then the agencies underneath them are what? The traffic control centers.
That's actually the perfect way to visualize it, managing the actual flow of specific vehicles on that grid.
Because transportation is just too big for one agency.
Right. The DOTs simply cannot micromanage every sector, so they delegate the enforcement to highly specialized sub-agencies.
And for trucking, that's the Fmcsa.
Yes, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. And their singular mandate, their whole reason for existing, is to reduce crashes, injuries, and fatalities involving large trucks and buses.
Okay, so this is where we get into the actual mechanics of the rules, right?
Yeah.
The day-to-day stuff.
Right. The Fmcsa has this sweeping reach into the daily operations of a trucking company.
Like what specifically?
Well, they dictate driver qualification files, they set the strict standards for vehicle maintenance, and they handle the federal registration systems. Like, they are the agency issuing U.S. DOT numbers.
And the U.S. DOT number is what exactly? Like a license plate?
Sort of. It functions as a unique identifier for gathering and monitoring a company's safety information.
Okay.
The Fmcsa mandates that any interstate commercial carrier operating a vehicle over 10,000 pounds gross vehicle weight rating, or GVWR, must have one.
Wait, let's clarify GVWR for a second, because that isn't necessarily what the truck weighs when it's just sitting empty on the lot, right?
No, not at all. The gross vehicle weight rating is the maximum safe operating rate of a vehicle, as specified by the actual manufacturer.
So it's the potential weight.
Exactly.
Ah.
It includes the chassis, the engine, the fuel, the driver, and the maximum load it can legally carry. So if your vehicle's capability crosses that 10,000-pound threshold and you cross state lines for commerce, you are squarely in the FMCSA's jurisdiction.
Wow, 10,000 pounds isn't even that big for a commercial truck.
It really isn't. And they also require US DOT numbers for vehicles hauling hazardous materials or transporting a certain number of passengers, and that's regardless of the weight.
Okay, so what about carriers that are operating as for-hire operations? Meaning they're getting paid to haul freight that belongs to someone else.
That's a great distinction. For them, the FMCSA takes it a step further. They issue what's called operating authority.
Which is often referred to as an MC number in the industry, right?
Right. MC stands for motor carrier. It is essentially their federal permission slip to legally participate in the freight market.
And without it.
Without an active MC number, a for-hire carrier simply cannot legally operate, period.
Wow.
And the FMCSA can, and definitely will, revoke that authority if a carrier fails to maintain proper insurance or if they repeatedly violate safety protocols.
So they have real teeth.
Oh, absolutely. But where the FMCSA's presence is felt most acutely, like on a minute-by-minute basis by the drivers themselves, is through the hours of service regulations.
Ah, the HOS rules.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is where the tension really begins to surface in the source material.
Yeah, it is.
Because these numbers, they basically dictate the biological rhythm of a truck driver's entire life. We are talking about the 11-hour driving limit and the 14-hour duty window.
Right. And the mechanics of the hours of service are incredibly specific.
Break it down for us.
So a commercial driver can legally drive for a maximum of 11 hours. However, those 11 hours of driving must be completed within a rigid 14-hour consecutive window.
Meaning the clock starts when?
The very moment a driver comes on duty, whether they are doing a pre-trip inspection, fueling up, or just pulling out of the terminal, that 14-hour clock starts ticking.
And the crucial mechanism here, and I think this is what trips people up, is that the 14-hour clock cannot be paused.
Nope. It cannot be stopped for almost any reason.
So if a driver spends like 3 hours just sitting in a waiting room at a distribution center because the warehouse is backed up,
those 3 hours are draining directly from their 14-hour daily allowance.
oh man, so they're just burning daylight.
Exactly. They're burning daylight. And once they hit that 14th hour, they cannot legally drive the truck again until they take 10 consecutive hours completely off duty.
That is strict.
Very. And on top of that daily limit, the FMCSA enforces cumulative weekly limits too. A driver cannot drive after being on duty for 60 hours in 7 consecutive days, or 70 hours in 8 consecutive days.
It's just so much math to keep track of. And historically, drivers tracked all of these hours using just paper logbooks, right?
You did, yeah.
For decades.
But the FMCSA fundamentally changed the landscape recently by mandating ELDs, or electronic logging devices.
Right, the ELD mandate. And that basically removed the honor system from the entire equation.
Because you can't fudge a digital clock. Exactly. An ELD is not just, an app you download on a smartphone. It is a physical piece of hardware that plugs directly into the commercial truck's engine diagnostic port.
Oh, wow. So it's wired into the truck itself.
Right into the brain of the engine. It detects when the engine is running, and it automatically shifts the driver's status to driving once the vehicle reaches a speed of just 5 miles per hour.
5 miles per hour? That's barely rolling.
Barely rolling. And it logs the engine hours, the miles driven, and the exact timestamps, creating this tamper-proof digital record of the driver's entire day.
So we basically have this massive digital surveillance system in the cab, directly tied to the engine, designed specifically to prevent exhausted people from piloting 80,000-pound missiles.
That's the core idea, yes.
Well, on paper, the ultimate goal of ELDs and strict hour limits is to stop fatal crashes, which is great. So shouldn't everyone in the industry be thrilled about this?
You would think so.
Right. But the source material highlights so much pushback against these safety measures. Both sources, left and right, acknowledge this huge friction. Why is that?
Well, the pushback really comes from the friction between a completely rigid digital system and an incredibly unpredictable physical world.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
When you apply a digital clock to the reality of the North American highway system, you essentially strip away a driver's agency to manage their own fatigue.
Because the ELD just tracks time.
Right. It tracks time perfectly, but it absolutely cannot measure how tired or awake a person actually feels.
Yeah, because the machine doesn't care if there's a snowstorm shutting down the interstate in front of them.
Exactly. Or a massive pileup blocking the lanes for 4 hours.
It just keeps ticking.
It just keeps ticking.
Yeah.
Consider that detention time scenario we mentioned earlier. A driver arrives at a receiver to deliver a load, and they are forced to wait in the dock for 5 hours.
Which happens all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
So maybe they take a nap in their sleeper berth during that time, and they wake up feeling completely rested. But the 14-hour clock has just continued to tick down that whole time. By the time they are finally unloaded, the ELD says they only have, say, 2 hours of legal driving time left.
What?
Right. Now, they are forced into this pressure cooker. They have to race the clock to find a safe place to park for the night before the machine flags them for a federal violation.
Which actually introduces a completely different safety hazard.
Exactly. The driver might feel fully rested and totally capable of driving safely through the night, but the federal regulation says they must pull over and park.
And conversely, I imagine a driver might feel incredibly fatigued just a few hours into their shift, but they feel this immense pressure to keep driving because they know that 14-hour window is vanishing.
Yes. They are watching the clock bleed away, and they know if they stop to rest, they won't make the delivery and they won't make money.
That is a brutal dynamic.
It really is. And the financial realities just compound all of this stress because regulations inherently increase the cost of operating a business.
Sure, because compliance isn't free.
Not at all. You have to purchase the ELD hardware, you have to pay the monthly subscription fees for the software, maintain these extensive driver qualification files, enroll in random drug testing consortiums.
It's just a staggering administrative load.
It is a massive burden. And the sources really emphasize a stark divide in how this burden impacts different segments of the market.
The divide between the mega fleets and the small owner-operators.
Exactly. There is a massive operational gap there. A large trucking corporation with, say, 5,000 trucks, they have a whole dedicated safety department.
Right. They have people just sitting in an office handling this.
Right. They have compliance officers whose entire job is to audit logs, manage the Fmcsa portals, and ensure every file is up to date. The burden is totally absorbed by corporate infrastructure.
But an owner-operator, a person who just owns a single truck and operates under their own MC number, they have to manage that exact same regulatory burden.
Yes. They are acting as the CEO, the safety director, the HR department, the mechanic, and the driver all simultaneously.
That's why.
So the cost of compliance hits their profit margins significantly harder.
Okay, so we understand the rules written by the DOT and the Fmcsa, and we see the real-world friction those rules create out on the road. But rules on paper mean very little without enforcement on the asphalt.
Right. Someone has to actually check.
Because the policymakers in Washington, D.C. aren't the ones standing on the shoulder of Interstate 80 in the pouring rain, physically checking the air pressure on a trailer brake.
Definitely not.
So who are the actual enforcers?
This introduces the third major pillar in our source material, the Cvsa, or the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance.
Now, the sources make a very specific distinction here that I think often confuses people outside the industry. The Cvsa is not a federal regulatory agency like the DOT or the Fmcsa.
No, they are a completely different entity. The Cvsa is actually a nonprofit organization.
Wait, a nonprofit?
Yeah, it is an alliance made up of local, state, provincial, and federal commercial vehicle safety officials, along with industry representatives.
Oh.
And their jurisdiction is massive. It spans all of North America. So we are talking about the United States, Canada, and Mexico.
Okay, so if the Fmcsa rates the curriculum and sets the academic standards, the Cvsa is like the organization that creates and administers the standardized tests.
That is exactly what they do. They develop the precise operational standards for roadside inspections.
Give me an example of how that works.
Well, the Fmcsa might write a broad rule stating that a commercial vehicle must have, functioning brakes.
Right, which is pretty vague.
Exactly. So the Cvsa creates the out-of-service criteria. That is the exact standardized mathematical threshold that dictates when a brake is legally considered defective.
Oh, I see. So there's no ambiguity.
Right. They designed the inspection protocols so that a state trooper in Texas, a Ministry of Transportation officer in Ontario, and a federal inspector in Mexico are all using the exact same criteria to evaluate a truck.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's look at the mechanics of an actual roadside inspection, because the sources show it goes far beyond just like glancing at the tires.
Oh, it's incredibly thorough.
When a CVSA certified inspector pulls a truck over for a level 1 inspection, what are they actually looking at?
Well, a level 1 inspection is the most comprehensive roadside check there is. It is a 37-step procedure encompassing both the driver and the vehicle.
37 steps.
Yeah. On the driver's side, the inspector is going to check the commercial driver's license, the medical examiner's certificate, and they will pull the data directly from the ELD.
So they're checking the digital logs.
Exactly. They are looking for hours of service violations, missing duty statuses, or any indication that the driver has manipulated the electronic logs to try and hide driving time.
And what about on the vehicle side? Because this isn't just a quick walk around. The inspector is physically getting underneath this 80,000-pound machine.
They are literally getting on a creeper and rolling right under the axles.
Wow.
They are checking the pushrod travel on the air brakes to ensure the slack adjusters are keeping the brake shoes properly aligned with the drums.
That is highly technical.
Very. They are listening for audible air leaks in the pneumatic lines. They are measuring the exact tread depth on the steer tires. They evaluate the steering mechanisms, the suspension components, the coupling devices holding the trailer to the tractor.
And the cargo itself, right?
Yes, the securement of the cargo itself.
So if an inspector finds a violation that crosses that threshold defined by the CVSA, they issue what's called an out-of-service order.
Yes, they do.
Now, that sounds severe, but what is the actual mechanisms of that order? Does the driver just get like a heavy fine and a warning to fix it later?
No, an out-of-service order is immediate and completely non-negotiable.
Wait, really?
Yeah, if a driver has violated their hours of service, they are placed out of service for 10 consecutive hours right on the spot.
They just have to sit there.
They just have to sit there.
Yeah.
And if a vehicle has a severe mechanical defect, like a failing brake system or a tire with exposed fabric, that vehicle receives an out-of-service sticker.
And they can't drive it to a shop.
The truck legally cannot move from that exact location until a mobile mechanic comes out to the roadside and physically repairs the defect.
Oh my goodness. The financial penalty of that downtime, plus the cost of a roadside repair and the delayed freight that could be devastating for a small carrier.
It can absolutely bankrupt a small company if it happens at the wrong time.
And the CVSA actually runs coordinated enforcement blitzes to test the entire industry at once, don't they? The sources highlight an event called the International Road Check.
Right, Road Check. It is this massive annual 72-hour enforcement initiative.
Basically a pop quiz for the whole continent.
Exactly. Over those 3 days, CVSA certified inspectors across North America conduct high-volume, continuous inspections. They often pull over tens of thousands of commercial motor vehicles in just 3 days.
That's incredible.
And each year, they announce specific focus areas, like they might highlight tractor protection systems one year or anti-lock braking systems another year, just to signal to the industry where the enforcement will be the heaviest.
Okay, so a roadside inspection results in an immediate fine or an out-of-service order today. But how does that specific event on the side of the highway ripple out to impact the broader business of moving freight later on?
That's the real kicker.
Right, like how does a mechanical issue in Ohio alter a trucking company's bottom line weeks or even months later?
This is where we see the entire regulatory ecosystem close the loop. When an inspector completes a CVSA inspection, that data doesn't just, sit in a local filing cabinet in Ohio.
Where does it go?
It is uploaded directly into the Fmca's federal databases. The Fmcsa uses a system called the Safety Measurement System, or SMS, to organize all of this inspection data, all the crash reports, and the entire violation history.
Oh, wow. So they're taking all of these disparate roadside events and compiling them into a permanent public safety record for the carrier?
Exactly. They aggregate the data and assign the carrier a percentile rank across different safety categories, like unsafe driving, hours of service compliance, or vehicle maintenance.
That's graded on a curve.
Yes, they compare carriers against their peer groups. So if a carrier has a score of 80% in vehicle maintenance, it actually means their inspection record is worse than 80% of similar-sized fleets.
Oh, so a higher score is actually bad.
Very bad.
I imagine a major crash obviously damages that score significantly,
Hmm.
but do minor violations move the needle? Like if a driver just has a burned out marker light on the back of the trailer, does that actually matter to the company's macro level safety rating?
It matters immensely.
Really? Just a light bulb?
Yes, because the system heavily weights the frequency of violations. A string of minor maintenance defects, a chafing air hose, a broken taillight, a missing fire extinguisher will rapidly spike a carrier's SMS percentile.
Why do they care so much about the small stuff?
Because the system views a pattern of small failures as an indicator of a generally poor overall safety culture. If you aren't checking your taillights, what else aren't you checking?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And who is actively monitoring these percentile scores? Just the government?
No, the freight brokers.
Okay, tell me about them.
Brokers are basically the risk managers of the supply chain. They secure freight from shippers like big retail brands, and then they hire trucking companies to actually move it.
Right?
And a critical part of a broker's operation is carrier vetting. They utilize transportation management software that pulls data directly from the Fmcsa's SMS database via API integrations.
Oh, so they aren't just manually checking a government website. Their software is actively ingesting the carrier's federal safety score in real time before they ever assign a load.
Instantly. If a carrier's SMS percentile crosses a certain threshold, say they hit that 75th percentile in hours of service violations, the broker's software might automatically flag them as do not use.
Wow.
The broker legally cannot hire them, because if a broker knowingly hires a carrier with a poor safety record and that truck causes a fatal accident, the broker can be hit with a massive negligent hiring lawsuit and held financially liable.
It really changes the perspective. You think of a trucking company's survival resting purely on how many miles they can drive or how much freight they can physically haul.
Right, the physical labor.
But their survival actually rests almost entirely on their administrative safety profile.
It really creates a fascinating dual reality for motor carriers. As we discussed earlier, compliance is a massive financial and operational burden. It costs so much money and time.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, a flawless safety record is a carrier's greatest competitive advantage.
How so?
A strong SMS percentile unlocks better insurance premiums, it protects the company from catastrophic liability in court, and it ensures priority access to the highest paying freight from top-tier brokers. Compliance truly is the ultimate currency in the transportation market.
That is so interesting. Let's just briefly recap the mechanics of this ecosystem, because we've mapped out a massive interconnected web today.
We really have.
We started at the macro level with the DOT laying out the overarching transportation grid. Then we zoomed into the Fmcsa, the Traffic Control Center dictating the rigid rules of the road, issuing operating authority and mandating that digital surveillance of the ELD. Then we examined the intense friction those rules create for the drivers out there physically racing against that 14-hour clock. Then we met this Cvsa, the International Alliance, writing the standardized roadside inspection protocols to enforce those rules.
And tying it all together.
Exactly. We saw how the data from those inspections feeds right back into the federal databases, generating the SMS safety scores that ultimately decide if a trucking company gets hired or if they just go bankrupt.
You really cannot separate one pillar from the others. The rules dictate the enforcement generates the data, and the data governs the economy.
It fundamentally changes how you look at a commercial truck when you pass one on the road. But before we wrap up today, what is a final thought we can leave our listeners with, based on the deeper implications of these regulations we've discussed?
Well, if we look closely at the shift toward electronic logging devices and the truly rigid enforcement of the 14-hour clock, there is actually a profound philosophical shift happening on our highways right now.
What kind of shift?
By mandating ELDs, we have essentially handed over the measurement of human fatigue to a digital clock connected to an engine block. As these devices track a driver's duty window down to the absolute second, we have automated the enforcement of human endurance.
Wow.
And it raises a really compelling question. When a machine dictates exactly when a human is legally tired versus legally awake, regardless of their actual biological state or the reality of their environment, are we actually building a genuinely safer system? Or are we simply forcing complex human biology to conform to a digital grid?
That is an incredible concept to consider. We are treating the human biological rhythm as if it's just another mechanical component that we
Mm.
can monitor through the engine's diagnostic port.
Exactly.
That is definitely something to really analyze the next time you're driving down the interstate boxed in by those massive machines and you pass a truck driver grabbing a coffee at a rest stop, just racing against a digital clock.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden machinery of the highway. We will catch you next time.